Good morning. Good to have you with us on this Friday. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. We're going to get started this morning at the White House, where the Trump administration is downplaying the first major shakeup to the president's staff. Mike Waltz is stepping aside as national security advisor. The administration says he'll instead be nominated as ambassador to the UN. It comes more than a month after Waltz was embroiled in that leak of U.S. military plans known as Signalgate. Now, Signal is that chat app where a journalist was accidentally added to a conversation discussing sensitive military plans. Well, Vice President J.D. Vance told Fox News yesterday the move wasn't a firing and could even be seen as a promotion.
Donald Trump has fired a lot of people. He doesn't give them Senate-confirmed appointments afterwards. If the president wanted to fire him over the Signal thing, which, by the way, was a total nothing burger of a story, he would have just done it. But he actually decided it's better for Mike to be in this new role. He's given Mike the new role. That's it.
In addition to his current job, Secretary of State Marco Rubio will serve as interim national security advisor.
On another front, the president's immigration crackdown is facing new pushback in court. A federal judge in Texas yesterday rejected the administration's use of the Alien Enemies Act to deport alleged gang members to El Salvador. That judge was appointed by Trump. There are also signs of a potential thaw in the president's trade war with China. Beijing says it's evaluating an offer from the White House to discuss those crippling tariffs which have rattled global markets. Tariffs and immigration, those are two of the issues that motivated thousands of people to demonstrate yesterday. Crowds took to the streets to express support for labor unions and to protest the president's policies on International Workers' Day, also known as May Day. We have full team coverage on all this. NBC News Justice reporter Ryan Riley is standing by with more on immigration. Our business and data correspondent Brian Chung is at a car dealership with an update on those tariffs. First, let's go to NBC News White House correspondent Vaughn Hilliard with the latest from Washington. Vaughn, good morning. Let's start right there with Mike Waltz. This debacle with the Signal group chat happened more than a month ago. That's when that journalist was accidentally added to a group chat with top Trump officials who were discussing airstrikes on Yemen. So why now? Why is the president reassigning Mike Waltz now?
Right. We know that the Signal chat saga rankled the president because it enveloped not only his vice president, but his chief of staff, his Pentagon Secretary, Pete Hegseth. Effectively, all top leadership in his White House but him were on this message and shared with The Atlantic, which published those messages. And not only serious questions over the national security implications of Mike Waltz, but also his response in the aftermath of it, not taking total ownership of it, suggesting that somehow the contact information for the reporter who the president has long loathed somehow was, quote, sucked into his phone unknowingly. So there were serious questions. But at this moment in time, just 3 months into the administration, this is notable. Yet another national security advisor coming off of the first administration when he went through 4 national security advisors. This is a president who had turned to the former Green Beret, former Florida congressman, somebody who is widely respected across national security circles, and is now moving on from him, though nominating him to go before the Senate to be confirmed as the nominee for the ambassador of the United Nations.
Vaughn, switching gears, there are growing signs that Elon Musk may be on his way out of Washington soon. He's told reporters he's going to be working on government projects only 1 or 2 days a week now. What do we know at this point about the future of Doge and his place in it?
Right. This comes just days after the earnings came out for Tesla, in which they saw steep declines in their market value. This, for Elon Musk, is him acknowledging that he intends to go back and focus on his companies. He says that he will return to Washington about every other week and will work on Doge-related projects, as he described it, 1 to 2 days a week. Those young millennial staffers that he has harnessed to ultimately actually implement across the federal agencies and departments Doge's cost-cutting efforts, they will stay on board, to our understanding. It's not clear who is exactly going to lead. Last night on Fox, Elon Musk talking about his move to pivot, but also the apparatus that he had built and intends to have stay around here in D.C. Take a listen.
It's a long-term enterprise because if we take our eye off the ball, the waste and fraud will come roaring back.
They can doge when Democrats get back in power.
Yeah, we're trying to have it be such that the funding is removed, so the grants are gone. So there's a lot of work required to restart the waste and fraud. and that will at least slow it down.
Now, Elon Musk over the last 3 months has made a lot of inaccurate claims about how federal money has been spent, suggesting that there are thousands of dead people that are getting Social Security checks when there's no indication that that is reality. He also promised a week before the election at that major Madison Square Garden rally of then candidate Trump's to cut $2 trillion from the federal budget annually. He has announced only $180 billion worth of cuts. And again, a lot of scrutiny, especially among Democrats on Capitol Hill, about those cost-cutting efforts that Elon Musk has gone about.
Vaughn, another big headline here. We learned about an executive order the president signed late last night. It aims to end federal funding for the public broadcasters, NPR and PBS. What reasons is the administration giving for this, and just how much could this hurt these two longtime institutions?
Right. Let's be clear. This is, again, a part of the long laundry list of items that then candidate Trump and now President Trump wanted to go and ultimately execute on upon taking the White House. Going slashing the federal funding of PBS and NPR was one of those goals. Now, to be clear, about 10% of NPR's funding comes from direct or indirect federal funding, and about 15% of PBS's comes from federal government funding. And so far from a great majority. At the same time, PBS and NPR, they set up as their own independent news organizations to be free of corporate oversight, and that has long been the intention of both of these organizations. The president overnight signing this executive order, which we should also note as part of this executive order, there is going to be likely court challenges because that federal funding that goes to NPR and PBS annually is appropriated by Congress. And as we have seen in other cost slashing efforts from this White House, the courts have intervened because it has been long-standing view of the courts that it is not the prerogative of the executive branch to decide whether or not congressionally appropriated funds are spent or not.
Vaughn, before we let you go, what do we know about the software China says it received from the White House to try to start trade negotiations?
Right. This is a development. China has said that repeatedly said that there are no talks between the two sides, despite the Trump administration trying to suggest publicly that there are direct negotiations. But just yesterday, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for China writing in a statement that they are open to engaging in dialogue with the United States about trade negotiations. At the same time, ordering the U.S. to pull back its 145% tariffs that they have put on Chinese goods coming into the United States, creating an effective embargo. China writing in part here in a statement in response to the Trump administration, quote, if the U.S. wants to talk, it should slow its sincerity it should show its sincerity and be prepared to correct its wrong practices and cancel the unilateral tariffs. Exactly whether the U.S. will be willing to pull back on those 145% tariffs is the question that the White House now must respond to. Guys.
All right. Vaughn Hilliard in a very energetic fly reporting from Washington this morning. Vaughn, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Let's stay on trade. A 25% U.S. tariff on auto parts that's set to take effect tomorrow. It comes after President Trump signed an executive order on Tuesday easing auto tariffs for domestic car producers. NBC News business and data correspondent Brian Chung is at a Subaru dealership in Lakewood, New Jersey with more on this. Brian, good morning. Great to see you. Walk us through what exactly these incoming auto tariffs are and how they're going to work.
Yeah, good morning, Joe. Good morning, Savannah. It's been difficult to track because there have been so many updates on the tariffs. And when it comes to the automotive tariffs, yes, the 25% tariff on the Finnish automotive products have been in place for about a month. But tonight, effective at midnight, car parts will now be tariffed at 25%. And even despite the announcement that we got from the White House earlier this week that there would be some blunting of the impact of those tariffs, the 25% tariffs on those parts will still take effect. It's just now the case that the automotive companies that will be buying those products will be able in some cases to get a rebate for those increased costs, which they hope will help some of those U.S. automakers, go through the impact of those tariffs without having to pass the costs on to customers. Remains to be seen whether or not that will be the case. But again, when you think about the impact of higher cost parts for automotive products, that's not only going to make, in some cases, new car products more expensive, but also even those that are existing, car owners potentially raise the cost on them as well. If you have to get a replacement, if you have to come in and bring your automotive product for, repair at the shop, shop, well, that can make it more expensive for you as well, again, to the magnitude of 25%. So even though we did have the announcement earlier this week, again, a pretty big and impactful tariff that will be taking effect midnight tonight of 25% on auto parts.
So, Brian, what else could this just mean for both domestic and for foreign car companies?
Yeah, well, one of the estimates that we got came from Anderson Economic Group. This is a Michigan-based group that looks at the impact of these tariffs to your bottom line, consumers that could be in the market for a new car. And they projected that the cost of a new car could still be as much as $2,000 to $12,000 more expensive, depending on what you're buying. $12,000 for kind of those larger SUVs that do come from abroad. But they said even domestically made vehicles that are assembled here in the United States could still see costs go up by $2,000 even after the revisions to the auto tariffs that were announced by the administration earlier this week. So, yes, that is a little bit lower than, say, the $3,000, in some cases $4,500 impact they were expecting for those mid-sized, smaller sedans prior to the adjustments to the policies earlier this week. But again, for consumers that could be in the market for a new vehicle, it could still be thousands of dollars more expensive. Now, here at this, a Subaru dealership, the Pine Belt Subaru here in Lakewood, New Jersey, I was speaking to some of the those that work here, the manager telling me that, yes, they haven't had to raise prices quite yet, but effective May 3rd, they're worried that the manufacturers that make these vehicles could then increase the cost on dealers, which would then start the pressure on them to have to raise costs on consumers. Not happening yet, but it's also coming at a time where inventory could be shrinking. Fewer vehicles are just arriving at the ports to come to lots like these over here at this dealership, which means that there could be fewer choices as well as those price pressures coming depending on how prolonged these tariffs are.
Brian, if you're an existing car owner, what do you want to know about these tariffs?
Yeah, well, look, the car parts tariffs would be more impactful for you because, again, if you weren't in the market for a new car, then you didn't have to face the 25% tariff on the finished automotive products that have been in place for about a month or so. Now, the issue is that with car parts now effective to get more expensive midnight tonight, well, that's going to be an issue because, again, we're not the ones that are getting the rebate. It's the auto manufacturers that are buying those parts. So those costs could end up falling on Americans. Guys.
Brian Chung, thank you very much.
The Trump administration is continuing to face pushback in the courts over its deportation of migrants to El Salvador. A federal judge ruled the Trump administration's use of the Alien Enemies Act to deport Venezuelans that it says are gang members is illegal.
Judge Fernando Rodriguez Jr., a Trump appointee, said in opinion on Thursday that the White House improperly expanded the meaning of the law, which is meant for use during military invasion. The ruling marks the first time a judge weighed in on the merits of Trump's use of this 18th century act for deportations.
NBC News Justice reporter Ryan Riley joins us from Washington with more on this. So, Ryan, tell us more about why the judge is rejecting the president's use of the Alien Enemies Act in his district, but not deportation by other means.
Yeah, so this is, again, a Trump-appointed judge who made this ruling, and basically saying that, he cannot restrict the executive from using the normal means to get people out of the country, right, that through the normal immigration process. But it's this invocation of this Alien Enemies Act, this ruling from 1798. You see on the screen there, the historical record renders clear that the president's invocation of the AEA through the proclamation exceeds the scope of the statute and is contrary to the plain, ordinary meaning of the statute's terms. So basically saying that the powers that are written into that law, meaning this wartime usually process that has only been used before, during the War of 1812, during World War II, and it was invoked the day before, or the day after, rather, the attack on Pearl Harbor. That's the usual metric that this is brought about. Congress did not intend for this to be this widespread way for the executive to overrule all of the functions of due process that are typical in the United States of America. So this is basically saying you have to go through that normal procedure rather than invoke the Alien Enemies Act. That actually doesn't mean that these individuals can't be sent out of the country. It just means that you have to go through that normal process rather than sort of expedite this and sort of get rid of that due process altogether.
So, Ryan, does this mean anything for the immigrants who have already been deported under the Alien Enemies Act?
This ruling, not in particular, but of course there's ongoing litigation about that. And what the Supreme Court has said is that they need the executive, meaning Donald Trump, needs to take these efforts to bring Abrego Garcia, for example, back to the country. So some of this is still playing out in court. But what this finds is that, at least in the context of this particular group of individuals, this Venezuelan gang, that this was unconstitutional. This this was not properly brought forward. So that's going to certainly stop it in that district, but it's not going to stop it beyond that. But that is a major place where a lot of these deportations were happening from, that southern district of Texas where this ruling came from.
Ryan, you mentioned Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Just yesterday, a judge presiding over the case rejected the government's request to keep delaying the proceedings. So what happens next?
Yeah, so there is a deadline later today involving some of the responses from the plaintiffs here. What they're sort of supposed to narrow the scope of what they are requesting from the government here. But there's just this huge gap between what the administration is saying, in public, and what Donald Trump in particular is saying in public, and sort of what's happening and what the courts have ordered here. They're trying essentially to slow roll this process, it seems like, through the Justice Department and the litigators there. And there's been efforts to sort of keep that behind the scenes and sort of keep that sealed. But the courts have sent a pretty strong message that the executive is supposed to try to use their best efforts to get back Abrego Garcia from El Salvador, since he was, in the administration's own words, mistakenly sent there.
All right. Ryan Riley, thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. Well, this morning we are tracking dangerous storms that seem to have spent all week sweeping across the country. More than 30 million Americans from Texas to New York are bracing for the possibility of a weekend of severe weather. NBC News correspondent Adrian Broaddus has the details.
Days of torrential rainfall and severe storms across the South, turning deadly. Authorities say raging floodwaters killed at least 2 people in Oklahoma on Wednesday. One of the victims swept off a roadway, according to the Potawatomi Sheriff's Office. A deputy trying to save him, also swept away, needed to be rescued. The Oklahoma Department of Public Safety also saying an 86-year-old was swept away in her vehicle. Some residents forced to evacuate as the floodwaters rose. Powerful thunderstorms and hail pummeling neighboring Texas. Some parts completely overrun by floodwaters. More than 30 million Americans now under the threat of severe weather. From the Texas Panhandle to Pennsylvania, where at least 4 people are dead after severe storms left a trail of destruction, according to police.
The call volume last night was extraordinary during this storm, almost unprecedented.
On Wednesday, Governor Josh Shapiro declared a state of emergency for the counties surrounding Pittsburgh. That area seeing heavy rains and wind gusts hitting nearly 90 miles per hour, according to the National Weather Service in Pittsburgh, setting power lines ablaze and leaving tens of thousands of people without power. Adrian Broaddus, NBC News.
And with more severe storms expected this weekend, let's get a check on your morning News Now weather.
Angie Lastman's here with us this Friday. Hi, Angie. Good morning.
Hi, guys. Good morning. Finishing out our work week, unfortunately, with more of the same. It's been a busy one when it comes to the severe weather, specifically across the middle of the country. And you guessed it, that's where we've got more of that activity this morning. But we're going to see the same kind of storm system work its way to the east in the coming days. And that means unsettled weather for a lot of folks. This morning, we've already seen those thunderstorm watches in effect across parts of Oklahoma and Texas. We've got plenty of flood alerts up as well. I'll show you those in a moment. But the big picture is that tonight, we're going to see those kind of intensifying storms, specifically midday and beyond. And that means more of that severe weather potential and the heavy rain that, of course, has led us to some flooding concerns over the past couple of days. Here's the deal for the severe weather today. Stretch from essentially Nashville down to San Antonio. You have that good chance to see some large hail. We're talking 2 inches or larger. We've also got those strong wind gusts on tap, 60 miles per hour or higher, and the potential for a couple of tornadoes across that region. Again, Central Texas specifically looks like we'll have the best chance for the hail, but even still stretching all the way up into the Tennessee Valley, we could see some of those stronger storms. That system on the move here as we get through tomorrow, and we kick off our weekend with basically the slow-moving system bringing us a whole lot of moisture. We've got a lot of it to tap into, so the heavy rain is going to be a big potential, especially up across the Northeast. And because of that, along with the severe weather, we'll likely see some of these travel delays, especially as the Saturday goes on and you get into the second half of the day. The severe weather threat is still pretty expansive, but it's not quite as impactful. We're not looking at all of those ingredients to be there for really things like tornadoes and such. That risk is on the low end, but we could still see some hail, maybe some stronger winds up and across parts of the Northeast and stretching down across the Southeast. In the meantime, it's been multiple days of really heavy rain across parts of the Southern Plains, Oklahoma, Texas specifically. We've unfortunately got new rounds of that heavy rain on top of those saturated soils. So no surprise, I don't think it should be to anybody that we've got all these flood alerts alerts in effect specifically for Oklahoma City this morning. More rain on the way for folks there, but we're also going to see anywhere from 4 to 5 inches of rain across parts of isolated parts, I should say, of the Northeast. It's going to be kind of a soggy weekend, even as we get through Sunday. Here's a big picture look at your Saturday. If you're looking for the good weather, sunny, mild, it's the middle of the country. They deserve it after a very busy week. We'll keep that going for Sunday as well. It'll be rain on the bookends of the countries across parts of the Southwest. We'll see some showers and storms. But guys, the Kentucky Derby, it's on tap. And unfortunately, it looks like the track could be a little rainy. We'll keep an eye on this. We could see some of those showers and thunderstorms and temperatures in the upper 60s. I know that's not what people want to hear, but it's the news I have to give.
And you'll be watching with a hat, right?
Yes, I will. You and I will.
That's right. I got to make a hat. All right, on the list.
You look so cute in summary.
Hey, you look like you're going to the Derby.
I know. Look, we didn't even plan this. Look at us with our little
guys, you didn't tell me about
check.
the pastel.
I know. Thanks, Angie.
You got it.
All right, this morning, Newark International Airport is recovering from a tough Thursday. Just weeks before the start of the summer travel season, some passengers were stuck with delays of 5 hours or more. Now the Transportation Secretary is sounding the alarm, saying we are starting to see cracks in the system from decades-old air traffic control technology and staffing shortages. NBC News senior correspondent Tom Costello has the details.
At one of America's busiest airports, gridlock. 24 hours of ground stops and delays at Newark International, a critical hub for United. Arriving flights delayed 5 to 12 hours.
All we know that this is an ATC FAA issue.
This red-eye flight from San Francisco to Newark turned around mid-flight. On the West Coast, passengers waiting in long lines.
Yeah, this is rough.
The FAA blames the chaos on equipment issues, runway construction at Newark, and staffing issues at Philadelphia TRACON, which guides aircraft in and out of the airport.
What I think you're seeing is you're starting to see cracks in the system.
American 237.
Still short some 3,000 controllers nationwide, the DOT unveiled plans to staff up within 3 to 4 years, including recruiting more military controllers, bonuses for academy grads and veteran controllers who don't leave before mandatory retirement at 56. One Newark controller tells NBC News they lost radars on Monday, radios on Wednesday, and things need to change. It's not a safe situation for the flying public. The FAA and the ATC union insist air travel is safe.
I think this is a pivotal moment of seeing what the stresses and pressures of this career path are.
Stress and strain with summer travel weeks away. Tom Costello, NBC News, Washington.
Joining us now for more on this is NBC News aviation analyst Jeff Guzzetti. Jeff, good morning. So, we just heard so many issues there. Radar and radio outages and staffing shortages at Newark, as well as some other issues sprinkled across the country, obviously kind of centered on a couple airports here. But should people be concerned about the overall ability for safe travel that gets you somewhere even remotely on time right now?
Good morning, Savannah. Well, I think that they should be confident in the ability to safely move airplanes, or having the FAA safely move airplanes. However, with the summer season and with some older equipment and a controller staffing shortage, they should expect some delays. Now, 60% of these delays are usually due to weather, but another 20-30% are due to staffing and equipment problems, which is what you saw in Newark yesterday. So I think the FAA will slow down traffic, which will cause delays, but they will make sure that safety is not compromised.
Let's talk about air traffic controllers, because the FAA says it's short about 3,000 of them. So that means it could take years before they're fully staffed. What kind of strain does that put on the system?
Well, Joe, it puts strains on the system because controllers have to work overtime, or they have to try to handle this large volume of summer traffic into their normal working schedule. So it is a problem, but I think the FAA is really doing a good job in what they call supercharging their initiative to get more controllers. They're throwing money at the problem, and you need money to recruit and retain and upgrade and train. And so it is a shortage. I think they're making some good strides against it, but it is going to take a couple of years to get back to full strength.
Jeff, there's this proposal to upgrade the aging air traffic control system. And as we're discussing, we've got this staffing shortage that seems to have persisted. That all, though, of course, takes time and money. What does it mean for travelers in the immediate, in the short term, this summer? Expecting more delays?
It depends on the weather, Savannah. So, like I said, weather accounts for 60% of the delays perennially. So we know there's going to be a large volume of passengers, and we know that there's going to be weather. We just don't know how bad that weather is going to be. So I think it'll be kind of like last summer. There's going to be periods of time when there's going to be cancellations and delays, but I think the safety is still being kept maintained.
All right, Jeff, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.